Welcome to MacroCode. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. So today we are going to learn about Entity Framework Core in ASP.NET Core 8.0. So Entity Framework Core is a lightweight, extensible, open source version of the Entity Framework data access technology built for .NET Core applications. So we are going to create a simple ASP.NET Core Web API and actually demonstrate how we can use Entity Framework Core. So what can you do with Entity Framework Core? So Entity Framework Core has a few features that allows you to actually save data to the database, manage database connection, configure models, query data, and even configure change tracking. So we are going to actually create a simple project and demonstrate how this can be done. So there are two approaches while developing with Entity Framework Core in ASP.NET Core application. And the first approach is code first approach, and we also have the database first approach. So on this video, we are going to do the code first approach, and if you request, we will also do the database first approach. So to begin with, I'm going to create a simple project. And on this project, we are going to use ASP.NET Core Web API. So I'll just do Web API here. So then I'm going to choose ASP.NET Core Web API. So there we go. So then next, then I'm going to say here EF Core sample. So that is my project name. Then next, so then I'm going to create here, I'll just use none, then configure HTTPS support, then enable OpenAPI support and use a controller. Then I'll choose next. So when our project creates, I want to talk about something called DBContext class. So DBContext class is actually the backbone of the entire concept in Entity Framework Core. So treat DBContext class as a session with the database. So an instance of this class allows us to do the data operations on the specified models. So what I want us to do on our application, I want us to install the NuGets. That is the Entity Framework Core NuGets. So just do Entity Framework Core. Then this is what you need to choose. So I'm using the latest stable version. So click install. So these are some of the NuGets. Accept. So once that is installed, I want us also to install the NuGet, that is the Entity Framework Core.Tools. So just do here tools. Then install this one. Accept. Then also install SqlServer. We are going to link our application with SqlServer. So just do Entity Framework Core.SqlServer. This is it. Install. Accept. Then I also want us to install Designer. That is the design. Entity Framework Core.Design. Click this and install. Then once we have that, I now want us to do something. I want us now to create a class, create a folder here called database. Let's just create a folder called database connection. Database connection. Then here I want us to create a class called DBContext. And as we have just said, DBContext is like a backbone for the entire application. So it actually kind of looks like a session with the database. So I'll just do DBContext. So if you do that, then I want us to inherit something here called DB. So here I want us to call this application DBContext. application DBContext, because we actually this one as well, let's rename it. Then this should inherit from DBContext. So if we do DBContext, so, and you can see we are using Microsoft.EntityFrameworkCore. Then here I want us to have a constructor. Just do CTO. Then inside our constructor have DBContext options. Then pass our application DBContext. Then here just do options. Then here we can do base. Just have a full column. Then do base. Then we can do options. So once we have that, inside here, we now need to create something. We need now to create our models, which will actually translate to tables. So I'm going to create here models folder. So in the models folder, let's create a class called customer. Then in our customer, we can actually have public int ID. So these are some of the properties of the customer. We can have the name. So this is string. We can also have the email. And we can have the phone number. Phone number. So this should be Q. So after doing that, we need now to have so to create our table, we need to have it on our application DBContext. So I'm going to do public DB set. Then I'll just pass my model customer. Then here I'll give it the name of my table, which will be customers. So this is the name that will actually reflect on our database. So I'll import my model. So here, then I'll just do that. Then so once we are done with that, so there's one thing that we need to do. We need to actually now connect this. We need to connect this to our application. So if you come here, you'll see there's a file called appsettings.json. So this is where we need to have our database connection. So I'll just do here connection. So connection string. Then in our connection string, we can do default connection. Default connection. Then we can now give the server. So you can say the server, and the server is actually now our database server. So I'm going to take this, the server name. This is my server name. Then I'm going to have it there. Then I need to have the database. So I can create the database. So I'll just come to databases, then create a new database called EF sample. So I'm going to copy this name. So if I do EF sample, that is my database. Go back to our file. Then name here we'll have the database. Then you give it the value. So this should be is equals to. Ensure this is server is equals to database is equals to. Then another thing that we need is a trusted connection. So just have this to true. Can also have multiple active result sets. Multiple active result sets. Set this to true. You can also trust server certificate. So trust server certificate, set this to true. So once you are done with that, then we need to do one thing now. Come to our program.cs file. So I want us to configure now something. So here, I want us to do builder, let's do here builder dot services, then dot add DBContext. Then you need to have our application DBContext here. Application DBContext. Then we can have now our options. And the first thing is we need to tell it the kind of the database you are linking to. So you'll say use SQL. Then in our SQL, we need to pass the connection string. So I'll just do configuration. If we do that, let's import something. System.configure it. No. These I need to import. I'll just do configuration, then dot get connection string. Let's do that. Then here our connection string, remember what we had defined. So our connection string is this one. We need to take this default connection and we need to have it here. So once we have that there, then I can do here comma. I can actually, let me just close it here. Then we need now to have this. So this one, we need to do something here called builder dot configuration dot, then this is closed. We need to close another one. So once we are done with that, so there is one thing that we need to do now. There are two very important commands when you are dealing with the EF-core. So just come to tools, then you get package manager, then console, then you'll get a window like this. So in this window, we need to add migration. So I'll just add migration. Then I can give it a name. I can call it initial migration. So if everything is okay, we should be able to get a folder here on this other side called migrations, and we should be able to get the initial migration file with the timestamp in it. So this will generate some kind of like SQL commands, and you should be able to see how it looks. And you can see it is done. So if you come here, you'll see there is a folder called migrations, and we have initial migrations. So on the initial migrations, let me close this. So on the initial migrations, you'll see there is create table customers with ID, name, email, and phone number. With a constraint, we have our primary key here, and it actually drops the table if it is there. So if we go back to our database, you'll notice that we don't have this table there yet. So if we refresh, we don't have the table. So to get these commands, translate this and actually create this table, we need to do one command. So come to tools, you get package manager console, then now do update database. So if you just press update database, it will now create our table named customers. And if you are keen, you'll see there is a commands running. And if you are keen on these commands, you'll see that we have some SQL commands, that is statements. So you can see create table customers, ID int not null identity, which is an incremental. We have the name, email, and we have the data types, and we have our primary key here. Then you can see it actually has another table called EF migrations, which tracks the migrations that we have done. So if we now go back to our database, you'll notice that we have now the table called customers, and we have another table called EF migrations. So these EF migrations actually tracks all the migrations that we'll be doing. So you can see we have the one called initial migration, which is the name that we gave our migration. And now we have the customers table, which is the models that we created. It has now translated to this. So as you can see, the name of the customers table is actually what we gave it on our application DBContext. So if you give it something different here, it will actually give it the same table name as this name that you provided here. So we've created our table, we have everything. So the next thing that I want us to do is we can scaffold. So just right click on controllers, then add, then you can say add new item. So I'll just say new controller. No, let's just go back. Right click here, say add new, then say new scaffolded item. Then I'm going to use MVC, that is API controller with action using Entity Framework. Then if I click that, it will ask me to choose the model. I'm going to choose my customer model. Then it will ask me for the DBContext. I'll choose my application DBContext, and it will give me the controller name. So you can change this or you can leave it as it is. For me, I'm going to leave it as it is. So if I click add, it will now generate all the CRUD operations for the customer. That is all the endpoints that we require to create, delete, update, and even view all the details of a customer. So if you are new to this channel and you are watching this video, consider subscribing, like the video below, and also comment down in case you want us to do something. So as you can see, it has generated our controller called customers. We have our get method. So you can see get customers. You can get customer by an ID. You can also put customer. This is updating. You can post customer. It will actually add a customer, and you can delete a customer. So if we run this API of ours, we are now able to do all those things with all the endpoints that are there. So let's just wait and see. So for those who are following this channel and you have not subscribed, consider subscribing, like our video, and comment down below. So you can see there we go. So our application is launching, and you can see we have now our customers. We have our customers API, whereby we can actually get the customers, the ID, name, and phone number. We can post, and we can actually delete and update. So if we just try now on this section, we can actually give it a name. You can say macro. Here we can say macrocode@gmail.com. Then you can say here, you can have this. Then if we do that and execute, it will actually create the customer with these details in our database. So you can see everything is okay. If we go back to our database and we select, we should be able to see that we have that particular record. So let me just, if I try to execute again, as I execute, it will be inserting the records to our database. So let me just execute multiple times. So if we go back to our database, we will have a lot of those customer details, as you can see here. So then you can also, if you want to pull it, we now have our get endpoint. You see the get customers. So if I just try this, I can click here, and it should be able to give me the list of customers with their IDs. And I can actually even retrieve a single customer by an ID. So using the get customer by an ID endpoint, you see this endpoint. So if I try this, I'll actually supply the ID here. I want the customer with the ID 15. Then if I do that, it will actually give me the customer with that particular ID. You can also delete. So if I say delete, I'll delete a customer with ID 15. So if I execute, it will actually delete that particular customer. And if we come to our database, you see this is 15. If I retrieve, we will only be having 14 customers. So you can see we're only having 14 customers. So that is it for today's video. If you like this video, comment down below, subscribe to our channel, and see you in our next video. Bye.